The St. Louis Blues drop an absolute heartbreaker to end their series, end their season. All good things must come to an end, and tonight the St. Louis Blues season did, dropping Game 7 in Winnipeg against the President's Trophy winners, the Winnipeg Jets. Final score 4-3 in double overtime. Thanks for tuning in to the Blues Hub post-game show tonight on Sports Hub STL. I am Ethan Hannaford, joined tonight by Thomas Welch, Mike Meyer, and Jacob Stanoch, and we are going to break down all of the action. We want to hear your guys' thoughts in the chat, your frustration, your anger, hopefully also some positive things on the season as a whole. But this is the place to get it all out. We are here for you fans, and we want you guys to be just as much a part of this show as we are as well. The first comment before we get to immediate thoughts that I'll throw up here is from Hamsta, 1.6 seconds. That is how far away St. Louis was from having a date in Dallas here later this week for the Western Conference semifinals. So let's go ahead and let's dive into it. I want immediate thoughts here, and then we'll kind of go into some game breakdown and what went right, what went wrong for St. Louis. But just to start, let's go into some immediate thoughts. Mike, I'll start with you.
I don't know if you can get much clearer than that. 1.6 seconds left. If I'm honest, I didn't expect for this series to be able to go 7 games. So the fact that we got this way, I mean, this was huge. This was absolutely huge for development, huge for this team. But boy, that was frustrating. I was on the couch watching it here with my kids, and they go, no, when they tied it up. Boy, I mean, tip of the cap here to Winnipeg, like absolute great series. Great. It's just heartbreaking because again, it's 1.6 seconds. But boy, they had a serious lack of offense and any bit of sustained offensive pressure. And you had a bad feeling about this the entire time. I don't want to get too terribly much into it because I'm just going to keep going. So I want to be able to just keep passing the torch.
Thomas?
Yeah, it feels like there's two very dominating schools of thought. The first one is that the Blues shouldn't even have been here, went on a crazy win streak just to get to this point. And then the second school of thought is they had the upper hand in this game. It was a 2-0 lead, and then 3-1. All you had to do was close it out. And we talked on this post game specifically in games down the stretch. Are we concerned about this team's inability perceived to close out games with, buzzer beaters at the end? We said, no, it'll be fine. Playoffs, it'll be a different beast, all those things. And it reared its ugly head. So it'll be a long off season, but this is a young team way above where it should be in development in terms of a rebuild and a retool. And there's a lot to learn from this game for everybody involved, whether you're 21 years old or, almost 41 years old. So yeah, we'll see what happens, but I'm obviously disappointing for all the fans in chat and from all of us here for sure.
Jacob?
I think the best way I can put it is I feel like I just went through a breakup almost. Really enjoyed every second of it down the road. Had some of the best moments right towards the end, and then heart just ripped right out of my chest. And it's also just like a breakup. It'll hurt for a couple of days probably. But eventually, we'll get over it and get into the off season. But I mean, I'm sad they lost, obviously. I want them to win as much as I do, but I'm still so proud of this team because I think the best thing you can take of this is they weren't supposed to be here against the best team in the league. One of the best teams we have seen in a long time in the Jets. And the Jets finally, got it together and won a game that was close in double overtime. So obviously we'll talk about it later, but there's a lot of schools of thought with this, a lot of ways you can cope. But for right now, and I know it's just like everyone else, it stinks. It really does, especially in the way they lose. But I'm not going to dwell on it because as much as the season's over, I'm still happy with how it, I'm kind of happy with how it ended, even though it could have kept going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think of how close St. Louis was to making history. I mean, this very well could have gone down as the biggest upset in St. Louis Blues franchise history. I mean, that much of a difference between these two teams going in when you look at the full season product that Winnipeg was able to put up. But it just wasn't meant to be. So let's go ahead and let's start to dive through it, guys. Let's take a look. And before that, a quick reminder that Blues Hub Postgame Show is sponsored by Hot Shots here on Sports Hub STL and presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. The Blues, we talked about it on the Game 6 postgame show, guys. One of the biggest keys for this team was setting the tone early and getting the crowd out of it. And boy, did the Blues do an excellent job of that early. It only took 70 seconds for them to get on the board, thanks to Jordan Kyrou with assists from Parayko and Buchnevich. And they did exactly what they said that they needed to do early in that one. You could have argued that Parayko could have perhaps taken that shot early, but it didn't really matter. And all of a sudden, you're thinking, okay, here we go. And just a couple of minutes later, Matthew Joseph takes advantage of a rare mistake from Kyle Connor, who has the neutral zone turnover. And he nets one short side, doubling the lead for St. Louis. And at that point, it almost feels like a you can do no wrong kind of situation. As far as starts go, it couldn't have been much better for St. Louis and how things looked in that first period, Mike.
Yeah, this was absolutely just a massive frontier. I mean, this was a team who had all the momentum going into Game 7, and they still had their foot here on the gas. And this is absolutely, I think, the first period that you wanted. There's a little bit of pushback here from Winnipeg, but as far as starts here were concerned, the two quick goals here from St. Louis just to really start setting a precedence and a tone here for what this game here was going to look like was exactly, I think, the start that you could have drawn up. Outside of, your big top dogs scoring, getting goals here from Joseph, getting a goal here from Jordan Kyrou here. Finally, we found him, he's back, right. And I thought, man, this is going to be a huge coming out party here again for Jordan Kyrou, but I'll take one here from him just to at least, set the tone.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thomas, thoughts on the start?
The start was great. I think it kind of encapsulated the game as a whole. It was the Blues taking advantage of the Jets' mistakes, right? And Kyle Connor, I think, the second goal I think it was Nemetnikov that kind of skated over the puck in the neutral zone and then get an odd man rush kind of going the other way, and puck ends up in the back of the net too. So it was two big ones to start it off, and the Blues were kind of off and running. But the play in the second period and the third period kind of looked like they were just kind of playing defense, and I don't know if scared is the right word, but they were definitely timid to make sure that they weren't making any mistakes. And by doing that, you're putting a lot of pressure on your defense and on Jordan Binnington, kind of fumbling pucks out of the zone, not able to make the clearances from the defensive side of the puck, giving the Winnipeg Jets multiple chances after the puck should be cleared, which was kind of the Blues' kryptonite throughout the course of the season, even going back before Four Nations. And then, the writing's on the wall from there. So, great start, but yeah, not great after that.
Yeah, it doesn't end up being enough. 0 chances in the first period for the Winnipeg Jets. So they did exactly what they wanted to do. They set the tone. They took advantage of a still shaky Hellebuck. That second goal, there's no reason that should go in either. And then we also saw a big loss early in the game for Winnipeg when Josh Morrissey took a hit from Oscar Sundqvist. An awkward hit. It wasn't like it was a super heavy one against the boards, but clearly Morrissey was shaken up, and we did not see him again for the remainder of the contest. And kind of similar to Game 5, despite being without one of their better players when they lost Scheifele, Winnipeg is still able to rally around. And for the large majority of the final 2 periods, plus the overtime and a half of play, the Blues opportunities, I should say, let's focus specifically on overtime right now. The opportunities, or let's focus in regulation, my apologies. The opportunities were pretty limited, it felt like, in the last 2 periods for the Blues. Jacob, your thoughts?
Yeah, geez. Sorry, I'm just still trying to. I'm sorry. It's just it's tough. But I know I shouldn't be this weirdly emotional about it, but it's during that game. Obviously, like we mentioned, it started well, and I think it was also a good job of the Jets to respond. And it started with that second period. We knew it was going to be tough. I thought they did a good job somewhat controlling it without getting too many chances. But it was a great push. Thought that Foxicle would have for sure been the dagger, but the third period push was even harder. And the trouble is when you get into that spot, the Blues, where it was just kind of that curl up, trying to defend everything you can, protect Binnington, don't let anything through. That's really hard to play for 20 minutes, and especially 6-on-5. That was a combination of, like I said, just trying to play defensively for too long, and now obviously they pull the net, and it's defense they've struggled with all game. I thought 40 minutes were great. Beginning of the third, all right. End of the third, miserable. Really need to work. They needed work getting the puck out. Had some struggles, and like we said, 1.6 seconds.
Let me ask you guys this: Connor Hellebuck allows 2 goals in the first period. It was, like I said, the second goal was shaky. How close do you think Scott Arniel was to pulling his guy? If he allows another one early in the second, do you think he pulls him?
No.
I think he pulls him at 4.
4?
Yeah.
I don't even know.
I think if we scored a 4th goal, he would have been gone.
I agree. I wondered if a third goal would have been enough with how shaky that second one was. All momentum was on the side of the Blues. If Winnipeg doesn't get it by the letter of the law, it was a slashing, but you would think that based off of the rest of how they called that game, that they wouldn't have given that slashing call to, was it Sundqvist? I think it was Sundqvist. If they don't get that call, who knows if Winnipeg gets on the board. And if it's a lot of what if. But I was curious as to what your guys' thoughts were on that. Obviously, Connor Hellebuck is is the best goalie in the National Hockey League as far as the regular season goes. But this is a guy that has been clearly shaky. Just curious of the thoughts there. He ended up, what we can say for sure is this: he turned it on. He clearly turned it on because the Blues had several good opportunities in the third period, several good opportunities in overtime, but Connor Hellebuck found a version of his regular season self. And Thomas, the Blues had some great opportunities later in the game still. The momentum was definitely not on their side for a good portion of the third period, but kudos to Connor Hellebuck. He showed up where he needed to late in this one.
Yeah, he did. And I think the OT was indicative of that, but if you're a Blues fan, you would like to not even get to that point. So it just keeps on circling back to that. But I do think that Jordan Binnington still outdueled Connor Hellebuck, even if he didn't win tonight, obviously. I mean, 47 shots on goal was the end total that I'm seeing on ESPN for Winnipeg. Hellebuck only faced 29. And like we're talking about, that second period for the St. Louis Blues, and really the majority of that third period, was just them playing defense, playing timid, trying to, I think, minimize the amount of chances for the Winnipeg Jets without maximizing the offensive pressure and, trying to find that next goal. And, maybe that played a part in, biting them in the ass. And I think it did. Like, if you're going to go up against the President Trophy winning team, even all things considered, they're playing with 5 defensemen. Like, these guys should realistically be gassed, right, throughout the course of the game. And Josh Morrissey is one of the best on their team. So, and no Mark Scheifele, and Nemesnikov looked like he was banged up in that game. Velarde was dealing with injuries at time. Ehlers was dealing with injuries. So, like, by all accounts, like, this is a game that the Blues should have closed out for sure. Up 2-0, up 3-1. Like, we talk about the quote from Doug Armstrong, like, put the dagger in their eye and twist it. Like, when you're up, like, I don't think the Blues did that. And I think, to my point earlier, like, ended up biting them in the ass. But I do still think that Jordan Binnington outdueled Connor Hellebuck, not just in this series, but in this game. He's still big game winner. But for the Blues going into this offseason and going up into the next season, the defense in front of him has to be better. And we've said that kind of season to season to season. That's always been the weakness. And we're always expecting him to stand on his head. But really, if this team wants to go far in the playoffs, that is their Achilles heel right now.
I want to bring up let's get to where things really I'm sure that everyone has plenty of thoughts on, and that was the third period, because even though it felt like things started to tilt in the second period, it felt like the Blues were still able to kind of steal it with the late goal from Radek Faksa. I loved the call from JK throwing in the rock by Faksa. That was great. But things really started to turn in the third period when it felt like the Blues really lost sight of their style of play. Things got extremely conservative, and to be quite frank, it felt like they let off the gas a little bit, and and as you just mentioned a moment ago, they weren't going for the kill shot. It felt like they were just trying to survive, and I think Ryan put it great here. Blues let off the gas after being up 3-1, and it shot them in the foot. This is your time to rant, boys. Get it out. We all know how the last 2 minutes of this one went. We all know how ugly things have been when the Blues are facing when they're facing 6-on-5, when they're at 5-on-6, and it once again proved to be a dagger for St. Louis, who gives up 2 goals in the final 2 minutes of regulation, moments away from advancing to the Western Conference semifinals. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, 1.6 seconds remaining. Cole Perfetti knots things up. So here's your chance, boys. Get it out. The floor is yours.
First of all, I want to start. I never want to hear 1.6. I know it's been all of maybe 30 minutes. I never want to hear 1.6 again in my life. Second of all, I'm going to start this now. I'm just seeing a lot in the chat talking about the choke job and all this. I'm going to open up and say, yes, this is, inexcusable in a way. They should not have allowed 2 goals in the third, up by 3, less than 2 seconds left. Yes, they're a professional sports team. They should be able to do this. It's their job. Yes, we're not going to sit here and trash on them all night because they couldn't close out a game, when on the other side of it, you have the best team. I've seen this team in Winnipeg. They are nothing short of fantastic. They would have controlled this series if Hellebuyck would have had a decent series in the net. It was really, I'm going to say it right now, I think it was Hellebuck's fault that this game went to 7, or the series went to 7, and then it went to overtime. If Hellebuyck makes half of those saves, we're not talking about this at all. We're not even here tonight. But that being said, talking about the play in that third, it was 20 minutes of sit back. We need to hold on to this 2-goal lead when it wasn't a comfortable 2-goal lead. That was the mind. They were sitting back too much. They only had a couple of chances where they rushed it up the ice. In the last 10 minutes, it was, doesn't matter, puck out, just curl up in a ball, stay in front of the net, don't give them lanes whatsoever. And like I said earlier, it's not going to give you any good looks, any good chances defensively, even if you just sit there tight in front of Bennington and just let them control the offensive zone and start ripping. Doesn't matter how many shots get on net or not. So that is what really, got to me, is that they just sat defensively. It was just, this is going to work. This is what's going to hold on to it. And that was the problem. They didn't decide to do anything else. They just said, we're going to stay put until the final buzzer, and enough of the 1.6s. And we will basically just say, we're going to hold on to the final buzzer. Doesn't matter what they do. We're just not going to let anything on net. And Jets started moving the puck around. They knew, hey, we don't have to just fire stuff on net. Let's move the puck around, get them moving around. And that's exactly what they did. The Jets, I will say, they've done a decent job adapting to the game outside of, the blowout home games, where if Hellebuyck makes a couple of decent saves, they definitely still have control in some of those games where, you'd look back at game 4, they opened up the scoring early or halfway through that first, and they had control of it. But instead, Hellebuyck let a couple of bad ones through, and all of a sudden it's a blowout game and the momentum changes. But again, it was tough. It was tough. They needed to create something other than just standing back defensively. And again, they needed to do something other than just sit and wait.
Anyone else have any rants or anything?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say it's nice seeing fans show up in the chat. So dropping my name, Thomas Welch, in the chat, by specifically is very cool. So thank you for the engagement. Thank you for listening to me talk. Anyways, I will say that this is a very disappointing loss for the St. Louis Blues, not because of the season they have, because that was the opposite of disappointing, and not because of, forcing this to game 7, because that was the opposite of disappointing. It was disappointing to me because this Winnipeg Jets team, right? You hung with them the whole series. To Jacob's point, I agree with him that Hellebuyck was a large part of the reason that it even went 7 games. But the health of the Winnipeg Jets, too, I think played a huge part. And so that, for me, was the most disappointing part, was that you knock out Morrissey early, who's one of their best defensemen. They're down to 5 D-men for the rest of the game. It goes to double overtime. They're suck and win. Their cardio is not great, right? And then the Blues have, all their full lineup still about them. So for the collapse to happen in the way that it did, in the familiarity that it did, and what we were so worried about coming into the playoff series, I think that's extremely disappointing for us, because we thought through the course of the 12-game win streak, that was going to all get figured out, right? In the way that it happened as well, with the defense collapsing, not being able to clear pucks out of your defensive zone, or struggling with the breakouts. Like, these are all problems that we saw earlier in the season that we thought we had gotten past when Jim Montgomery finally got his fingertips on the team, during the All-Star break and the Four Nations, when we went on the win streak, when we were just, taking it to teams that were near or very near the top of the standings down the road as the regular season went on. Then you get to the playoffs and it's like, these warts start to rear their ugly heads once again. So, and chat says big game Binnington, LOL. He still outdueled the Winnipeg Jets goalie Connor Hellebuyck. He had a better game in terms of save percentage. So I'll still take him. And if you're going to pay, like I said on the last post game, you're going to pay a goalie $10 million in the NHL. I'll take the one that wins big games more often than not, statistically more often than not, and not the one that is, your team wins in spite of his efforts. And that man is Connor Hellebuyck. So that's my rant right now. I'm sure I'll have some more comments, but the biggest disappointment for me is this Winnipeg Jets team was beaten and battered. It's very indicative of the San Jose Sharks in 2019. They had injuries up and down the board, and that was just the ones that we heard about, right? So this Blues team, there is a lot of youth. There is a lot of development that goes into this, because they have a ton of young guys, but this one hurts, because this is a game in a scenario when you're up 2 goals that you should be able to close out, and they weren't able to.
Mike?
I texted you guys this.
Here we go.
It was a fitting ending here to the season, simply due to the fact that they could not close out the third period. This was something that happened all too often, and the chat here has been, just right on it. That 6-on-5 here has been a problem all season long. It's been a problem here in Winnipeg. It has been overly exposed, and I'm watching this game on the edge of my seats. And again, I'm watching this here with my kids, and they're in such a good mood, and I am just hunched over, it's not over till it's over. It's not over, and there it is. And it's just one of those, what do you do to correct it? And I don't know right now, if the Blues have a true answer on how to correct this, outside of there's several bigger, older names who are on this defensive squad that need to get moved out. I mean, again, yeah, Pavel Buchnevich, he had some additional time. He made a mistake. He probably could have just killed that additional 1.6 seconds. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. There's no point in looking back and saying well, he could have done this. He couldn't. No, just should have done it. And unfortunately, it just came back to bite them in the butts. And at this point in time, again, 6-on-5, it just continues to kill them. And so you got to be able to just take some time here now going into the offseason. You got to be able to reflect. And I don't think that you're going to see this defensive core be the same defensive core. And I don't think you can have the same defensive core going into this. But I don't know what that looks like, because there's a couple of guys with some big contracts who are not coming off the books here anytime soon. I saw some folks saying, well, you got to be able to move Parayko.
What?
For who? Who are you going to get, and why?
You're going to be trying to find his replacement by moving him.
Listen, I understand the wanting to move some defensive pieces, but if there's one guy I wouldn't want to move on the defensive side, it would be Colton Parayko, who is coming off of the best year of his career.
Absolutely.
The best year of his career.
Absolutely. Yeah. You cannot be able to move Colton Parayko.
And what are you going to get back? Are you going to get back a top defenseman now? Because that's what he is. He's the number one defenseman. There's no way. That's ridiculous. That
It's
makes
the
me laugh out loud.
Pietrangelo conversation part 2, honestly. Like you move him out and, you know, hopefully bring in a different contract and different legs that provide some kind of different skill set. But you're the guy that you're going to try to replace him with, you're hoping will be as good as him. And that's very hard to find in that.
That's not going to happen.
This
It's not going to happen.
There's
of course always the conversation of moving out. You know, again, like we've had conversations here. You know, I've had my side conversations. You know, well, you got to move out Jordan Kyrou now. For who? For who? Like this? Yeah. This is not EA. This is real world, real dollars that are moving out, real skill that's moving out, real chemistry that's moving out. And I get it. I get the frustration that's here. I get the fact that it's 1.6. I get it. I totally understand here. But the fact of the matter is that you need the depth, and you've got a ton of depth here right now. You know, you saw, unfortunately, Jimmy Snuggerud made several mistakes that really could have bit this team here in the butt. And it's Jordan Binnington who makes the deal and saves him and saves his bacon here several different times. This is great experience here. And again, like I know some people don't want to say, oh, I'm sick and tired of looking here at oh, this is real world experience. You know, this is, you know, a learning curve. No, but it is. But it is a learning curve here right now because you're also playing up against the President Trophy team that you took them to double overtime in Game 7. And honestly, I'm extremely happy here with that. There's no telling on what the future is going to look like here for this team. There's no guarantees that they're going to even make the playoffs next season. None. But you know what? I'm damn glad here of this team. Very proud here of them. And I am very, very I'm ready to move on and start looking and piecing together all the little trinkets here, like surrounding this offseason, just so we can be able to come back here, ready to fight here for another day.
I do see chat saying excuses too. Like, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on, like, if you want to do a fire sale after, you know, this playoff series, what we're talking about right now, taking the President's Trophy winning Winnipeg Jets to a Game 7. Like, if you want to talk about moving Parayko, Kyrou, trading Jordan Binnington, like, that's fine. I get you're angry, right? But like, how, in what regard does that make this team better for next season? I would love to hear your thoughts.
There's the stat right there, guys. No team gave up more 5-on-6 goals in the NHL during the regular season than the St. Louis Blues, 13, and they gave up 2 tonight. And while the chat starts sending in some of those, there's a lot of people right now that the anger is being directed at Justin Faulk for his positioning on that final goal that was shot by Connor and tipped in by Perfetti. And Justin Faulk was kind of charged with having 2 men, but he didn't pick one or the other, right? You guys may probably have a little more as far as the X's and O's expertise in that area. How would you have liked to see Justin Faulk play that scenario differently in this situation?
Well,
are you guys familiar with what I'm talking about? Did you guys see the replay where he was kind of caught in between, right? It's a 6-on-5, so they have an extra man out there. No one's really on Connor out there, but he was kind of stuck slightly in between Kyle Connor and Perfetti, and it left Perfetti, right? There was nothing that Binnington could do when that shot was tipped in by him. But, you know, we've talked all series long about net front presence, and, you know, I wonder if, I know it's Kyle Connor, if you're right up on Perfetti in that scenario, perhaps Connor can walk it in, maybe in that situation. And I don't know if that's necessarily on Faulk, but my thought is the net front battle has been the whole thing all series, and that's what, along with the 5-on-6, the Blues, the kryptonite ends up being the net front battle on both the game winner and the game tying goals.
We're talking about Winnipeg's first goal, right? I'm
talking about the goal that tied it with a second left in regulation.
Oh, I see.
And the problem is with Faulk, and, you know, I've kind of, you know, I've always been a believer in Justin Faulk. I know he's a good puck mover. I liked his play even before he came over to the Blues. Obviously, it's been a while since that happened, but it's kind of hard to kind of stay on the Faulk train. As of recently, there's been a couple of big goals, especially here in this playoffs, where he's just kind of been caught. And it's not because he's, you know, or I should probably just say he's kind of puck watching, or is picking up just the wrong guys. And I don't think it's a team thing. I think it's kind of just a Justin Faulk thing. And, it's at this point, it's, one time's a mistake, 2 times, maybe 3 times something's going on. And that 3rd time, I should say, well, probably the 5th, 6th, 7th time was now. Yeah, Faulk is one I definitely understand. People have been saying to trade him since last season, if not longer than that. And, I've still been on him, and I've still believed in him. I think he's a good puck mover. He's got a hard shot, but defensively, he's had a lot of lapses, especially in this last half of this season here. And it really came back as the worst part, or the worst spot of the season, worst timing ever to have those lapses. And that, it's hard to defend Faulk on something like that. And it's really been just Faulk and occasionally Letty that have been struggling on those defensive positionings this season to really, I guess, just cost a handful of goals, and certainly some costly ones as well, that have given teams right back into games, tie games, or even win games. So, I mean, if he stays, something's got to be figured out. Simple as that. But other than that, I think if we can get something for him in the offseason, we've seen what Monty can do. Or seen what Doug can do, excuse me. So who knows? But if anything, I don't know if I can see Faulk staying on this team after the season.
I think the good thing that you're looking here at, I'm trying to pull up here his contract. He's moving now here into next season with a 15-team modified no trade clause. So
Yay.
He goes here from his full completely breaks here starting, I believe it's July 1st. And then at that point in time here, 15 teams he can be able to say no to. So that helps things out quite a bit.
Yeah.
But the problem is that you still have $6.5 million on the books here for him for the next 2 seasons.
Yeah. And of course, the question is, obviously, we've seen who can step up for him. It's just a matter of, is his style of play going to be something that, changes up? And obviously the question too, when we start talking about more off-season stuff, will be Torrey Krug, who we have not had pretty much all season, who people have not been very fond of either. So
everything I've heard about Torrey Krug is that his career is over. He'll likely never return.
Sounds
to the
like
ice.
it.
That is, yeah, and that's certainly, obviously it's at this point you're not missing anything from Torrey Krug based off of how they ended the season. It's just a matter of what to do with it, because obviously the look of right now is retired, so that's for sure another roster spot you're gonna have to fill no matter what. And obviously Tucker's gonna come up. I think Tucker's gonna be great. I just think Faulk does have a style of play that has helped occasionally, and is Tucker's style of play going to be something that's going to fill in that gap, make it better, or just give something completely different that doesn't hurt? We'll have to see for when Tucker, I can only assume, plays his first full season next year. And I have a lot of hope on Tucker. I really do.
I'm definitely optimistic about Tucker, and I have to imagine that I don't know if I see him necessarily as a top 4 defenseman next year. I think that he fits the role that he's in pretty well.
Yeah.
But I think that when you look at a guy like him, you're saying okay, that's where Nick Leddy's gone, right? Or that's where Justin Faulk is gone, and he's replacing them maybe as the full-time guy on that third pairing. Because who was Suter paired with the majority of the year on the third defensive pairing?
It was back and forth. Tucker was in a little bit
for a while,
and then Kessel jumped in there as well.
But Tucker wasn't the consistent guy out there all the time.
I believe Kessel was the one jumping in a little bit more. Who was Suter with today? Really blanking, but. Obviously, I should know who he played with.
Well, it was Letty a lot too, right? Playing on his offense.
I thought it was Letty on the third.
Yeah,
I thought it was Letty in the third pairing.
Yeah, and so I think
No,
so.
it was Letty.
No, it was Letty.
Because it's you have what, Parayko, Fowler, Broberg, and Faulk. Those are your top 4, right?
Yep.
And then it was Suter and
Letty.
Letty.
And Letty,
And
yeah.
then when Letty was
It could be
hurt,
Letty.
Tucker played a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you can only imagine.
I see Tucker. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring back Ryan Suter for what they paid him. I thought that he served that role extremely well this year. There was talks and flutterings that he might get traded at the deadline. I'm glad that they didn't. I thought that he was. I thought that he did a pretty commendable job in that spot. He's not going to cost you a lot. He's veteran presence in the locker room. I mean, I would be fine, and perhaps maybe you bring in you add some more depth, or perhaps Kessel adds a little bit more, or continues to take steps up, and maybe Suter's not playing nearly as much. But I thought that for what the expectation was for Suter this year, I thought that he exceeded it in pretty much every way, because I don't know if even the Blues expected him to do what he did this year.
Faksa as well. I mean, being such a staple on that WTF line, and I will say it did sound like his comments earlier in the season made it sound like he wanted to stay and that he would have to talk to his wife, I believe, was the comments that he made, but obviously they both love it here. The problem is that I think specifically in this game, but also in this series, I think the entire league took notice of how dominant that WTF line was, and Faksa was a part of that. So there's a very real chance that, Doug Armstrong doesn't want to pay a 31-year-old forward like Faksa, $3-4 million or whatever it is, and another team might want to, given his potential. So,
and that's where you start to, when you start to set up next year's lines, right? And you look at, okay, who's going to be gone? Well, there's most of the team is returning next year as far as the forwards go. The problem is you have so much depth, and when Broberg's back, Snuggerud is going to be on the third line. He's not going to be a top 6 guy next year.
Holloway, I mean.
Yeah,
Holloway.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, when Holloway returns next year, Snuggerud will be a third line guy, and everything's going to shift. So the question becomes: is there room still for a Radek Faksa? Which is a tough question to ask because of what the WTF line did for you this year. I mean, let's not forget, guys, and this was partially writing on the wall as well. There were multiple games during this series that the WTF line, your fourth line, was your best line. That just can't happen. You're not going to win a series, a 7-game series, let alone a series against the President's Trophy very often, when your fourth line is the best line in multiple games. I think the Stars didn't step up enough at times during this series, personally, for the Blues, specifically in the last 3 games.
No, and you're absolutely right. And that's where, I mean, again, it goes back to, when the chips are down, okay, who's showing up? And a lot of times it was not your Pavel Buchnevich's. Thomas was doing a whole heck of a lot. He really was. And I'll do credit here to the Jets because they were swarming him. 2 guys were on him constantly. And so it was very, very difficult here for a guy like Robert Thomas to get anything done here. Colton Parayko kept able to step up, but and I don't know, was Jordan Kyrou injured? I don't know if we're going to ever really be able to know, but he certainly didn't look like he was all there. This was absolutely a series that you would want Dylan Holloway in that lineup every single game. And maybe it's a different factor with Dylan Holloway in the lineup, but you can't just say, okay, well, one guy's missing, because again, you look at the Jets lineup and the Jets had multiple people missing here throughout the entire series.
Right.
And that also has a huge factor here with experience. The Jets have been going through this cycle for the last several years, and they're finally breaking through. I mean, this was a huge sigh of relief for the Jets to finally break through of this first round. So, hopefully we don't have this huge cycle like the Jets here did, but this was absolutely just a spot where you needed your top line guys to be your top line guys. And unfortunately, they just didn't show up here on the score sheet. And
let me just say this. We appreciate everyone that is in here in the chat. There's a lot of Jets fans in here. Some of you are being very respectable, and good series. Some of you are being trolls. That's okay. You're welcome to comment whatever you want. But mark my words, if you guys play like you did in this first round series, you guys are going to get your asses kicked in round 2 by Dallas.
It's going to be so bad.
And there is no question about it. So congratulations. You beat the second wild card team in 7 games, and well done. Good job. Congratulations. But if you want to put up a performance like that again, listen, it's going to be a quick exit, and you guys are going to be back to asking the same questions. And I know that you guys you could go to the excuses of, well, now we're banged up. Scheifele's out, Morrissey, who knows what's going to happen? Yeah, because the second wild card team beat the crap out of you. And I don't know. I just thought it was funny that all the excuses immediately went to, this Blues team is dirty. And then when they couldn't play dirty, then they were screwed. This was playoff hockey. And let me just say it, the part of playoff hockey is not just the best team, but it's who can stay healthy the longest. And right now, Winnipeg is not set up very well. So best of luck to you guys. But I tell you what, if you guys repeat what you guys just did in this first round matchup against the second wildcard team, it's going to be a short series against the Dallas Stars. And you guys are going to be crying and wondering the same questions that you were just a couple of days ago. Honestly, a couple of hours ago after the first period of this game, probably. So there's my rant. Am I frustrated with how the Blues played tonight or how things finished? Absolutely. Should they have won this game? Yeah, they probably should have. They had it in the bag. It felt like they couldn't get it done. The Jets, kudos to them. They played until the final whistle. And one of my keys that I wrote down at the beginning of this game was you have to play a full 60. And the Blues were not able to play a full 60 in a close game during this series, the entire series. And you could argue that they played a full 59-58 or 59-59, but not a full 60, and that ends up biting them tonight. I think that the last thing I'll say about this is for those that are saying that things that are upset, you have the right to be. But let's remember what the expectation was even going into the playoffs. Let's remember what the expectation was a month ago, 2 months ago. This team was supposed to be nowhere near the playoffs. What this team did down the stretch was absolutely miraculous. This team pulled out 12 straight wins out of nowhere. So this was never the expectation. There, you mentioned, Mike, the Jimmy Snuggerud learning experience tonight. There were multiple cases tonight, and I felt like this was the first game, in my opinion, maybe I just wasn't paying attention well enough, that I saw multiple times. I was like, "Ooh, yeah, mistake by Snuggerud." It felt like for the large part of this series, he didn't have a lot of those situations. It felt like that it caught up to him a little bit tonight. This team, I'm very optimistic about this team. Super optimistic. You look at the defensive core that this team has. Most of them, as at least the good ones, the pieces that we're excited about, right? They're all coming back. We'll see what Doug Armstrong does during the offseason. I have the utmost confidence in him based off of what he was able to do this year in acquiring Cam Fowler, which arguably was the best trade in the NHL this year, and then bringing in Jim Montgomery, which completely changed the course of this season for St. Louis, as well as the offer sheets for Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg last year. There's a lot of things to be excited about for this Blues team. Here's the only part that sucks, is that the Central is only going to get better, I think, in large part. The Wild, if they can be fully healthy next year, are going to be a pain to deal with. The Avs are kind of in cap hell right now, so they'll be kind of interesting to see where things go for them. But, Winnipeg's is still going to be around for a long time. It's a tough division. That's the only part that's unfortunate about it. But it's unfortunate for everybody else because the Blues have proven to the rest of the division, to the rest of the league, that they have re-entered I don't know if I would say quite entirely the cup contender window. Maybe, but they are most definitely a team to be reckoned with now. And there's going to be eyes on them heading into the 2025-26 season. So they
re-enter the chat.
There's mine. Exactly. There's mine for you all. So let me ask you guys this. Where do you guys want to go from here? Is there anything else you want to discuss, or should we bring up DraftKings right now and then we can hit it right after that? What are you guys thinking?
Bring up DraftKings and then we'll jump into it. I got an idea.
Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and let's tell you a little bit about DraftKings right now because as I mentioned just several minutes ago, the Blues Hub postgame show is sponsored by Hot Shots here on Sports Hub STL and presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app. There's the little picture there. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to play. Only $5. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins. Only with Pick 6 with DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
This is the Blues Hub post-game show. I am Ethan Hannaford, joined tonight by the whole gang, Thomas Welch, Jacob Stanoch, and Mike Meyer. All right, Thomas, you said you wanted to go in a certain direction. Let's hear where you're trying to go.
Yeah, so this weaves in the conversation about, who will be potentially in the top 6 next season, as well as the conversation of whether or not we think the Blues will make the playoffs next season, because it seems like Chad is kind of popping off about that, saying we have absolutely no chance, right? You've got guys, Robert Thomas, I think, we talked about it on the last post game, but he's risen to a status now where I think next season, if he's fully healthy, playing at the level that he's at right now, I think we're talking about a top 15 player in the NHL just because he continues to get better. And I think he's probably going to take this loss harder than anybody because that's the kind of player that he is, right? Jordan Kyrou, everybody's kind of on different opinions about him, but he was the leading goal scorer for the St. Louis Blues. So if you're thinking of trading him or moving him out, right, like that's a lot of goals to try to replace. And you talk about the magic that Doug Armstrong is willing and able to make consistently in off seasons and throughout the season, and going to get Jim Montgomery, bringing him in, who hasn't even coached an entire season yet. So that's another, added factor of this. We're talking about a Jim Montgomery that's like, I think his record with the St. Louis Blues so far is like 36-18, some ridiculous winning percentage, who really didn't get his thumbprints on this team until the Four Nations. Pavel Buchnevich, not a great game from him, but we know what he's capable of in a top 6 forward. Jake Neighbors showed us last season or a couple seasons ago that he's a 20-plus goal scorer. He did this season as well. So, and he's continuing to get better, and he's super young. Jimmy Snuggerud has world of potential in front of him, a bona fide sniper and a shot that plays. Obviously bumps to his game right now, but also hasn't played a full season. Zachary Bolduc has showed us that he's a hybrid player that you can slot up and down the lineup, that can also has a wicked shot, capable of scoring probably eventually 30-plus goals in the league at some point, and probably 10 to 15 on the power play. So when you talk about the potential of this Blues roster, it does not just lie. I know you talk about 13th oldest roster. I've seen Daraki put that in chat like 17 times now, like we're not seeing his comments. Well, we do. And we also, like, you can say 13th oldest roster, that's fine. You've got a lot of guys, affecting that statistic, and Ryan Suter and Braden Shen, that's fine. But you also have some crazy young players with a ton of talent, high-end hockey IQ, shots that play, and then you still got a pipeline full of guys like Dalibor Dvorsky. So to think that the future still isn't bright for this team, and the fact that they exceeded expectations in this season and exceeded really, I think, all of our expectations in this series against the Winnipeg Jets, to think that they're not going to be back or, not ride this high of a successful season by all regards into next season, I think is oblivious to this team.
Jacob?
Well, first this is something I was going to bring up talking about when you were in the middle of your rant, just talking about how no one picked the Jet. Like, I'm pretty sure more people picked either the Stars or the Avalanche more to pick the Cup than they did the Jets, despite being President's Trophy winners. And first time I've seen that in a while. Just want to throw that out there. Also, you talk about next year, and this is something that I've also always kind of thought about, is that the Blues for a long time, or at least for the past few years, have kind of not really had the big star player. The Central is slowly getting a lot more of those. Obviously, Chicago has Bedard, McKinnon over and also Makar in Colorado. Winnipeg, they've got Hellebuck, who's been there for years. Scheifele can also be thrown in that conversation as well. Minnesota having Marc-Andre Fleury this year. They got Kirill Kaprizov coming up in the ranks. And even maybe you could throw Matt Boldy in that conversation as well. Outside of Binnington and maybe Thomas, the Blues don't have that national star. And yet they're still putting up ridiculous numbers. They're still doing all these things. And, I think even you look at some of the teams that did make the playoffs that have all these great stories. For Blackhawks, for an example, this is a Blues team that isn't making these flashy, they're not getting flashy players. They're not making flashy plays all over the place. And they're still getting relatively far. And I think next season I wish it was still going now, but next season, I think it's going to be a perfect time for, a lot of these players, to really blossom into that spot. I think Robert Thomas will be right there. Binnington's right on the cusp. Can they pick up someone? I don't know. Do they need to pick up, a superstar? I mean, it's possible, but at the same time, Army hasn't picked up a big name, I don't think, yet in his tenure. So in terms of
Ryan O'Reilly.
Right. That one's a pretty big one. So
Just gonna throw that one out there.
Yeah, Ryan O'Reilly. That one definitely counts. Thanks for calling me out on that.
He fit a need, though. To be fair, he also had like a ridiculously negative plus minus when he was with the Sabres when we traded for him. So I don't know if he was that like the superstar caliber. Like, yes, he was a number one center, but I don't think we were talking about like a top 15, top 20 player necessarily that we're talking about right now. Like, if you bring Mitch Marner in here in the offseason, like, does he fix this team when his biggest knock is he kind of goes ghost mode in the playoffs too? Like, I don't know if that's the answer either.
For who? Good question.
Mitch Marner.
Can they bring in a guy like Mitch Marner?
Right. I don't think he would
be
even
traded.
Right.
Is that obviously tangent away? Does Mitch Marner leave the Leafs this summer? Just a quick tangent.
I don't think so.
I mean, no. That's what I wasn't thinking. I'm seeing, some people like on the thoughts. Obviously, it's like a doubt because Marner is arguably another generational talent, right? That's just kind of in the shadow of Matthews, which, any other team, Marner is the top guy.
Yeah, but you'd also argue that he brings the best out of them too. I mean, when you're on the line with Austin Matthews, I mean, you can say what you want about, being in the shadows. I would argue that being on a line with Matthews has only made him a better player personally, makes his stats, his lines, his everything about him look more appealing to a team. So I don't know if I would necessarily back that part, but it is interesting. Yeah. Mitch Marner will be an unrestricted free agent for the coming up. I guess I'm looking on Spot Track here. It says, I think it's after the 2025-26 season, I think. So I'm not sure if it's after this year or if it's after next year. As I read this, but
pretty sure it's after this year.
Is it after this year? So he will be going into this upcoming season. He's not under contract. Okay, gotcha. Right. Well, that's going to be that's an interesting question, Mike. Any thoughts on the kind of the superstar conversation? I know, Thomas, you just mentioned you think that Robert Thomas is moving in that direction. What are your thoughts on this, Mike, from a perspective of, do you think that the Blues need to go out and get that big name in order to eventually get to the next step as far as being a cup contender? Or do you think that they can continue to do it in the style that they have where, perhaps they're leaning on more guys that are right there around 20 goal scorers, positionless hockey, a full four lines? What are your thoughts?
So actually, I wrote a piece about this here a few weeks ago here over on the Sports Hub website about how Thomas is transitioning here into, I think, the next big superstar here, like within the NHL. And he's doing this in a way that's not just eye-popping numbers, because like you look at him right now and the point production that he put up here in the regular season was, really, truly eye-popping. But he's doing this here also in a true two-way center fashion where he's playing on the penalty kill. He's playing in all situations. He's just dominating in every single area. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but because he's playing in St. Louis, he's just not getting the attention that he wants to get. And maybe not that he necessarily wants to get, but that he deserves to get here at this point. Do they need to go out and get one? It's sure. It could never hurt to go get a big bat or a big stick, whatever you want to call it. The thing that I truly wonder and worry here about is where do you play him? Who do you really replace out? Because I can guarantee you this is that, none of these guys that you're going to try and be able to get are going to go without, if it's going to be a trade, okay, well, they're going to want Dvorsky. They're going to want Stenberg. They're going to want Snuggerud. Okay. So you're not able to move them out. Well, we're going to want Cairo. Okay. And who else are you able to move out? So these are all very, very painful trades that Blues fans are going to have to get behind then. Yeah. And yes, the salary cap is rising, and that's fantastic. That works out a lot in a situation here for the Blues, who have a lot of contracts already currently locked up, and it just helps a lot. But you have to be really ready to be able to move out some of those different players and those prospects that you may not be really wanting to be able to move out. So
that's where the name, I think, and forgive me for bringing it up again, but that's where I think Jordan Kyrou becomes an interesting name, because obviously it would have to be Kyrou plus, but if you were to try and get that big name, Jordan Kyrou would have to be the name that probably is included. That Robert Thomas is going nowhere, but Jordan Kyrou has his no trade clause kicks in, I believe, July 1st. So you have a couple of months here if you want to try and flirt with that and see if you can get that, superstar, the big name, then he is the guy that would have to be included. I don't think that there's, like you said, I don't think that there's room otherwise for that guy if you aren't moving someone out that's already in the top 6.
Right. And so here's my biggest concern here, though, is, okay, so you're moving out of Jordan Kyrou. Who are you replacing him with? Because are you truly going to try and go after yet another forward who we just listed off a lot of these forwards here for this top 6, a lot of them. And so if you are going to try and replace Jordan Kyrou, like, I'm cool with that. That's fine. Let's entertain all of these different notions. Like, I'm all for it. But I think you need to be able to really focus more on adding a premier defenseman, because Colton Parayko is only getting older. Philip Broberg is coming up here, and that's fantastic. It absolutely is. But outside of that, you've got Theo Lindstein, who's going to be coming over here from the SHL here within probably the next 2 seasons. He's not going to be ready here just yet. Do you try to target Buffalo again? I doubt you're going to be able to get like a Rasmus Dahlin. Would Owen Power potentially be a conversation? Would the Kings be willing to be able to discuss about like a Brandt Clark? If you're talking about moving a guy here like Jordan Kyrou, this is a big premier ticket. So let's talk big premier prospects, big premier players. So again, I'm all for the conversation, but again, you have to be willing to be able to ante up here to be able to make these big boy moves.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens going into the offseason. Recapping the Blues loss to end their season tonight, a 4-3 final in double overtime in Game 7 of round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Gentlemen, as we begin to slowly wrap up here, is there any other thoughts on the game tonight, the direction for the future of the team, what the offseason needs to look like, that you guys are curious or wanting to bring up here?
I just think what was most successful for us in 2019, and it really feels to me like, I know we're talking about a superstar here, but really the construction of the St. Louis Blues is always about rolling those 4 lines like you were talking about, Ethan, and having kind of hybrid players that you can slot up and down the lineup, have warriors that don't shy away from physicality and are built for playoff hockey. Even if the team doesn't always make the playoffs, they are built for playoff hockey. So I think that's going to be Doug Armstrong's mindset going into this offseason, not necessarily how can I go out and get a superstar, I think Mitch Marner's been knocked for his physicality as well sometimes. So if you're trading a guy like Jordan Kyrou to get Mitch Marner, I think we're going to run into people having the same conversations about Mitch Marner, that Obviously maybe he has a better playmaking ability and scores more, but they're still going to be just as mad about Mitch Marner's physicality. So I think for Doug Armstrong, really, like, if Robert Thomas is not elite, right, or if he's not at that level yet, we talked about how Mitch Marner has a guy like Austin Matthews to kind of finish those pretty passes for him. I think we saw a level of Robert Thomas kind of heightened, after he mimicked his game after Jack Eichel had that whole conversation with Jim Montgomery. But I don't know if we necessarily have a finisher on that same line right now. I mean, Jordan Kyrou had great success this season and was your leading goal scorer, but he had that success for the most part, at least towards the end of the season, with Dylan Holloway. So I think that kind of slots in your second line right there, because you don't want to split up those two guys. But how do you find a guy for Robert Thomas that's capable of bearing those goals when he sets up, a eyes closed, just ridiculous pass that somehow finds it on the stick of the guy's tape? And I think that's going to be the question mark for Doug Armstrong going into this offseason. Do you trust Pavel Buchnevich to return to form and be that guy? If so, leave him in there. If you don't, maybe look for suitors for him. Do you trust Jimmy Snuggerud to kind of step up into that role immediately? I know you think he's going to be back down to like a third line role next season, Ethan, but we have heard Doug Armstrong talk at times about him slotting him in with Robert Thomas and kind of, whatever future implications that might be. So it could very well be in Doug Armstrong's mind, like you're slotting Jimmy Snuggerud in first line minutes immediately next season, which is fine, but he has to earn that spot. And, a full season of Jimmy Snuggerud there would be great, and seeing his development and seeing, like what potentially has there. But like we talked about in this playoff series, there is going to be growing pains, right? So are you willing to sit through those growing pains, or do you want him to develop more gradually while, a different veteran takes that spot and kind of gives you more grit and more potential in reaching the playoffs game, next season? So I think these are all question marks that are going through Doug Armstrong's head, and he's obviously not going to have the answers to them tonight because he's probably still grieving the loss of the season like we are. But I think they're interesting conversations to have nonetheless.
Mike, you seemed like you gave a pretty emphatic head shaking when the name Pavel Buchnevich was brought up. Obviously, a disappointing season for him. He had the hat trick in Game 3, but was relatively quiet outside of that during the playoffs. This is a guy that is going to be is under contract for a long time after getting that 6x8. He's set to not be a free agent until 2031. So this is a guy that, as of now, the Blues plan on having as a part of their core. Things did pick up for him during this run to the playoffs. He was able to squeeze to the 20-goal mark, but I'm curious as to your level of optimism as to what Pavel Buchnevich can be for this Blues team. I know that there's been a lot of comments in the chat as well about wanting to get rid of Buchnevich. I want to hear your thoughts, Mike.
I think right now he is at best a second line forward. I think he is doing a lot better of a job because of like the players that he's surrounded with. And there are at times like where you'll be able to see Pavel Buchnevich playing a really good game. Like there's no denying that. He still does have those flashes, but in my opinion, he's not consistent enough to be warranted here as a top line forward. He's become more of a playmaker than a goal scorer. And that's, I think, one of my biggest problems. Not to mention the fact that he has regressed every single season. Statistically speaking, you have seen his point totals dip every single season. And I think signing him to that big contract was a bit of a big mistake, especially to how long that you signed him for. I don't like the outlook here, and I truly hope that I'm wrong. I really, truly hope that I'm wrong. But I think that this is going to be a contract that we're looking at here for a while and saying, yikes, this is a hefty contract for not so much production. And so unless he finds a different level of his game or a different style of game, I don't like what we're the return on investment that we're going to see here from a guy here like Pavel Buchnevich here, unfortunately.
Something that I'm going to be curious and for the 2025-26 season, we saw so many pieces for this Blues team pick things up, turn things around when Jim Montgomery came in. I'm curious as to what a full season with Monty at the helm for some of these guys can do for them. I'm not speaking specifically to Buchnevich because his play it didn't necessarily turn around when Monty came in, but it turned around once he got that extended time with the team. So did that have an effect? Maybe. Did it have an effect on everyone? Yes, it did. So that's going to be something that I'm curious to keep an eye on. Pavel Buchnevich, prior to this year, had several promising seasons, I thought, wearing the blue note on the chest. I'm going to be curious to see how he responds after by far the most disappointing season of his career in 2025-26. I think that next year is going to be very telling for what the Blues have in Pavel Buchnevich and what the upcoming years of this contract are going to be. Am I discouraged by what I saw this year from Bucci? Yes, absolutely. But am I set that is what the direction of the rest of his career will look like? Not necessarily. I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah, and I think kind of going off of that, I know a lot of people kind of jumped on Jordan Kyrou and said, whether he was seeing ghosts, whether he was injured, but he was kind of, quiet after that big hit that was thrown on him in this series. But when you talk about struggling in the playoffs, Buchnevich, to this point, I think after that hat trick earlier in the season is up to 4 goals in like 28 playoff games in his career. So that's not, in terms of a sample size of struggling in the playoffs, I feel like Buchnevich has the upper hand on Jordan Kyrou even in that regard. So just something to, keep an eye on as well.
Let's go. Jacob, do you have any thoughts?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the problem is, in my personal opinion, you get a guy like Buch and obviously Kyrou, the other name being tossed around. It's almost, in my opinion, kind of a bad look on Army to deal those guys after just not too long ago signing them to big contracts. And unless you're getting super fantastic returns that are going to most likely pay off right away, then you're saying, oh, then why did we just sign them for 6 and 8 years? There's no point in getting them to deal them 1-2 years after the fact of giving them massive contracts. So I think in terms of the Army mind, I think that's something to know. I mean, it's not going to prevent them. It's not just going to be like now we can't trade them at all. But it's certainly something I think that I definitely think it's on the minds of some GMs when they see players like that in spots like that is, how is this going to look if we just signed this guy to a big contract and now we're going to just trade him away after 1-2 seasons because they didn't produce to what we expected them to, or to the utmost ability to what their contract would expect them to have.
Tell it to Vegas.
Well, that's just Vegas. It's the definition of gambling is Vegas. So they do it with the Knights as well. That's just Vegas hockey, Vegas everything right there.
Let's go ahead and let's wrap up here with comments from the head coach, Jim Montgomery, who this was shared by Jeremy Rutherford on Twitter. Monty opened the presser by thanking the St. Louis Blues organization, fans, and players. As a coach, you try and hope to get your team to reach their ceiling. I think we came as close as we can in the last 3 months. I don't think we got there, but that was a great series, and I cannot thank our players enough for their commitment, effort, and execution. He followed up by saying on the loss, I've had a few painful ones. I've had overtime Game 7 losses. Anytime that your season ends, it is painful. I'm sure that locker room right now is just absolutely going through it, knowing how close they were. Anything that we are saying, they are feeling it tenfold right now. There is no doubt about that. And actually, you know what? I just see this chat coming across here, and this is a great point. The Blues choked and peaked at the same time. As far as this season goes, that's a really good point. That they were almost at the pinnacle of what this season was going to be. And the best right was that no one expected this team to go any deeper than a round. That there was no one that was saying this team was really going to be trying to get in the mix for a cup. So this really was just about as close. Exactly. This was about as close to what their peak was as it could have been. But yes, as a matter of fact, they did choke when they were just about to the top of the mountain for I think that we all set for them this year. And then the final one on the 6-on-5 goals against. It's an area of our team that has not been good all year, and it's an area I have to get better at so that our team is better next year at pulled goalie situations. So we will just have to wait until the 2025-2026 season to see how the Blues adjust at what you could argue was the biggest weak point of the team this season. Gentlemen, as we wrap up here, final thoughts on the game, the season as a whole. Jacob, I'll start with you.
I mean, contrary to what I usually do, I'll try and keep it short to as much as I can. I mean, I'm proud. I'm happy. I'm considering where we're at. Went from, sad to say I was a Blues fan who didn't watch much to now trying to care about this team as much as I can. And it hurt. It would, like I said, it was just like, a breakup where it was enjoyed it while it happened, enjoyed the ride with ups and downs. Felt really good right at the end, and sadly just got heart ripped out. But again, I'm very happy with how this season ended, considering where it was at, the pushback from a team. I mean, we could have just sat at 26th in the league all season and done nothing, but instead, they decided that, hey, we turned the season around, and I'm happy about that. And again, as much as you say, yeah, they choked, they should have done it. I'm not going to argue that. They should have been able to close that game out. But at the same time, I'm just going to appreciate the fact that, we made it to Game 7 against a team that was fantastic. One of the best Jets team I have seen ever in my hockey days. I've never seen a Jets team this good. And it was fantastic to see them push them as much as they did. And I'm so glad they did that. It sucks. It hurts that they just couldn't get it done. But, the season as a whole, I think I saw it earlier. Someone put it, it's not a fantastic, great season because it could have done better, but it's not a terrible season because we didn't finish, bottom 5 of the league. It was a good season. And I think that's what we can appreciate right now based off of what happened recent years, the turnaround, what was expected. And we got lucky and got where we are now. And, that's a lot farther than I think anyone thought we were, pretty much probably where they were even supposed to be. So I'm happy about that. Just kind of sucks how it ended.
Thomas?
Yeah, I think my final thought is something to build off of, right? Like Chad is talking about, we got a bunch of young guys on the team, obviously a bunch of old guys too, but I think that's going to change up a little bit. And we've given Doug Armstrong, he kind of went in with the offshoots this season in Broberg and Holloway and kind of laid the seeds to say like, hey, I believe in this team. Like if you guys want it, go get it, go make the playoffs. And, by the stroke of God, somehow this team figured out how to make the playoffs. So if you take the sample size of post 4 nations and put that over an 82 game season, you could be looking at like a top 3, team in the league and just playing, fantastic hockey on all cylinders. So I think the biggest thing for me is something to build off of. And going into next season, we got a long off season for Doug Armstrong to work more magic. But yeah, that's my biggest takeaway. And my biggest takeaway for this chat too, is if you're listening to this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. And you can also listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can be part of the show on YouTube at Sports Hub STL, and we're Blues Hub on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So those are my closing thoughts.
Mike?
Great plug here, by the way. Great plug.
Thank you. Thank you.
Honestly, I mean, just huge tip of the cap here once again here to the Jets. I mean, this was such a hard-fought series. I was very happy to be able to watch just this incredible series. I did wish that the Blues played better, but again, at the same point in time, I think this has just been echoed. Like nobody expected the Blues team here to be here at this point in time, and so you just now hope that they can be able to take the lessons learned here from this series and they can be able to just build here off of this. We need some of the younger guys to really start taking more and more momentum, more lessons learned, and so that they can be able to really take hold here of this team. And I think we're seeing the start here of that. And now it's just some of these younger guys to start really maturing here into just great NHL veterans here moving forward. So it's going to be interesting to see what some of these up and coming prospects and some of these undrafted some of these unsigned players here are going to end up potentially having an effect here on this squad, to see what in the world that Doug's going to do here in the offseason and what kind of an effect that Alex Steen's going to have here on this team here moving forward. I think that's kind of a point that kind of gets forgotten here about. This is as much of his team right now as it is Armstrong's, because of the feel that he's going to have here just moving forward. So I'm again just really happy here with this team, and happy to just be able to move forward.
Real quick before we say sayonara, one word: which team you hopping on the bandwagon for the rest of the way? I want everyone to say your team you're hopping on with real quick.
I'll go with the Jets. They've never won before, and it would be nice to say, hey, we took the Stanley Cup champions to a 7-game series in a season that we were all expecting to rebuild and retool. So I'm going to go with the Winnipeg Jets.
I'm going to say Oilers. I wouldn't mind seeing McDavid get his cup. He's been real close. Great team, and I think there's no better team to give Canada back the cup than the Oilers. But other than that, maybe give Ovechkin a swan song. Obviously he hasn't said anything about being this last season, but I mean, if he wins the cup, that'd be a perfect way to go out for Ovechkin. So either Washington or the Oilers.
Those are all my reasons just right there here, man. I just if it's not going to go to St. Louis, let it go to the East here. I don't care. Give Ovechkin just one last cup. That's all I care about here at this point now.
I think that I'm going to go ahead and roll with Toronto. I'd like to see the Leafs get one. I've been an Austin Matthews guy for quite a few years now. He's my fantasy hockey identity. So we've been
Ruby too. That would be sick to break a drought for St. Louis and for Toronto. That'd be badass.
We've been building around Austin Matthews with the Team Hanny franchise now for several years, and we've had a lot of success. So I'm backing my guy, even though the fantasy season is over. I'm backing my guy, and would love to see Toronto be able to overcome some of their playoff woes as well. And then my final wrap-up word would just be that, listen, I don't know if it was much of a coincidence that Sports Hub STL launched right when the Blues started getting hot. It's been an absolute blast to cover this run. It's been, what a start to Sports Hub STL it's been, and all the coverage we've been able to provide for all the teams, not just the Blues, but also the Cardinals, St. Louis City, SLU basketball, Mizzou basketball, and then eventually football in the fall. It's been so much fun. This is a great group of guys that we have here. It's been fun covering with you guys, and looking forward to hopping on and doing some stuff in the off season as well. There's plenty to discuss. There's plenty to keep up with as far as what things are going to look like for this Blues team. So you'll just have to be sure to keep up with Sports Hub STL. Follow us on socials, on X, on Facebook, Instagram at Sports Hub STL. Then click that like and subscribe button as well. Oh, and I totally forgot. Chief is also in Toronto. I completely forgot about that reason. That's another reason to be pulling for the Leafs. So that concludes our coverage of this one. The Blues eliminated in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs tonight. Final score 4-3 in double overtime of Game 7 against the President's Trophy winners, the Winnipeg Jets. From Jacob Stanoch, Thomas Welch, Mike Meyer, I am Ethan Hannaford, and we say so long here from Sports Hub STL.